Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And are we ready for this week? In this video, I'm going to start discussing the reports that Boris Johnson is planning on throwing the kitchen sink at the Privileges Committee inquiry this week as he prepares to give oral evidence on Wednesday. Put it this way, this is going to be the main focus of this channel over the next week. Should be spicy. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this process has dragged on a very long time. It has been almost a year, a few weeks off a year since MPs ordered the inquiry. And it was initially delayed because Johnson's government refused to hand over the evidence required by the committee. They kept handing over documents that were so heavily redacted, they were basically blank pieces of paper. It took until November, and a change of government, of course, before they got what they asked for. So there was all that delay. It was like half a year's worth of delay straight away because they couldn't get the documents from the government. Then it turned out they got an awful lot more documentation than they'd anticipated, so it took more months to read through it. The committee produced a summary of the main evidence against Johnson a couple of weeks ago, which we were able to read, but they have given him much more privately, a lot more, including the witness statements made. So now Johnson is getting ready to fire back with the legal team, which has cost the taxpayer about £250,000. I note that the Tories' cutbacks on legal aid don't extend to the lavish requirements of their own. Johnson's allies are attempting to claim that the entire inquiry is based on the Sue Gray report and that the Sue Gray report is flawed. Neither is true. If the inquiry were based on the Sue Gray report, it would not have taken almost a year to get this far. They wouldn't have needed all those documents from the government. It would have taken a couple of weeks and it'd be done. The inquiry is based on the mountain of first-hand documentary reports handed over by the government. Also, there's nothing flawed about the Gray report. When it was published, Johnson welcomed it. And given that it was about him, he said he was perfectly happy with it. It was about him. How could he say he was perfectly happy with it if he was reading it and going, well, that's not right, that didn't happen. No, he accepted it. The report was about his own first-hand experiences. Impossible for him to accept it if it didn't tie in with his own experiences. What Johnson's trying to do here is give Tory MPs a safety net to sink the process. He knows that he's as guilty as sin. He knows that the evidence against him is overwhelming. He knows that he'll be found in contempt of Parliament. He knows there will be a punishment. But he doesn't care about that any more than he cares about the numerous other times he's been found guilty of breaking the rules. He cares only about the consequences. A small fine is of no consequence to a man who burned £50 notes in front of homeless people for fun. A suspension from Parliament is of no consequence to a man who absents himself from Parliament on a regular basis to make speeches, making millions on the side. Of consequence is the potential for a recall from Parliament, because then he's no longer an MP. And as a result, no longer in contention to recapture 10 Downing Street, should Sunak become vulnerable later this year. So strategically, he needs either enough pressure on the committee to issue a suspension of less than 10 days, or he needs the vast majority of Tory MPs to vote against a longer suspension. He is unlikely to bring much pressure on the committee itself, so his target has to be the wider parliamentary party. The good news is they would happily reject the suspension. They would have happily rejected the entire inquiry, if only it won't get them into trouble with the public, who long ago turned against Johnson for what he did. And Tory MPs have seen what happened when they tried to get Owen Paterson off. How much more damaging will it be if they try and get Boris Johnson off? But Boris Johnson's a narcissist. He will believe that he can win public support back to his side. Indeed, he may believe he's already done so. So what he's doing is trying to persuade Tory MPs that he is giving them all the ammunition they need to justify rejecting the punishment to their constituents. The Telegraph is reporting today that Johnson has a dossier of evidence that will completely debunk the charges against him. To which I would have two questions. First, why is anyone going to take his dossier of evidence as being superior to the documentary records that came directly from the government? Second, if Johnson has had proof, not evidence, he's saying proof, that completely debunks the charges, why didn't he present it to the committee? Why didn't he just save a lot of time, money and effort by presenting his evidence to the committee? I'm sorry, but although his allies in the media will push this very hard this week, I don't know how dim you'd have to be to believe a word of it. He's just trying to hoodwink Tory MPs into rejecting the punishment, thinking that he's giving them all they need to face their voters. But he's wrong. There are two major problems with his hypothesis. First, the public already see Johnson as guilty regarding partygate. Every time new evidence emerges, it damns him even more. Boris Johnson is planning to counter this evidence with witness statements from the very people he's trying to give honours to. Who's seriously going to believe such witness statements gathered by Johnson in defence of Johnson by people who are being given honours by Johnson if they contradict the documentary evidence the inquiry have collected from the government itself? Second, most Tory MPs want some stability in their party as they gear up to the general election. Some of them are realistic. They see that opposition beckons, but they want to at least limit the damage in order to position themselves for a serious effort the following election. Some of them have not given up on winning that election. Fair enough. Either way, Boris Johnson is a barrier to that stability. This week, Boris Johnson is going to damage the Conservative Party's reputation in public. He's going to be like the 3-year-old having a massive tantrum in the supermarket while the embarrassed parent looks on, trying to work out whether calming words or threats will work best to shut them up very quickly. There are plenty of Tory MPs who will see Johnson's exit from Parliament as removing the main source of instability from the parliamentary party. They will welcome it. The ERG seems to be divided over some of the practical aspects of Brexit now, so there's only Johnson seriously threatening Sunak's position. And I don't even have to try and work out how many Tory MPs will want Johnson gone. Because you have to bear in mind, even if a Tory MP personally wants him gone, they may be part of a local party that is supporting Boris Johnson. So, Johnson will play on the fact that they daren't vote for the punishment. But it doesn't really matter. Boris Johnson needs about 90% of all Tory MPs to vote to reject the punishment, because almost all of the opposition will vote to support it. Johnson's only support on the opposition benches is going to be, Conservative MPs who've lost the whip and are therefore at the moment technically independent, and the DUP. And he may only get the support of some of those MPs, not all of them. Rishi Sunak has already announced a free vote should the committee recommend a penalty. Obvious course of action for Sunak, all he could do. In fact, it should be against the rules to whip for such a vote anyway. It's not a vote that has any bearing on party policy, so is outside the party system. Shouldn't be subject to whipping at all. But in this case, it doesn't matter. Tory MPs can vote as they like. That means most probably won't vote at all. This idea of the Tory MP who wants Johnson gone, but is part of a local party that doesn't, will just find some reason not to be there. That is fine. Opposition MPs will vote. See no route out of this for Johnson unless the committee is genuinely of the view that the suspension should be less than 10 days. But I don't think anyone paying attention believes that. Boris Johnson certainly doesn't believe it. The fact that Rishi Sunak has already announced a free vote for the punishment means he doesn't believe it. Johnson would not be making this much fuss about a possible suspension if it didn't also cost him his seat in Parliament. If he thought it might be like a 5-day suspension or even a 9-day suspension, he wouldn't be making this fuss. All Johnson's actually going to do this week is trash the party's reputation and his own. I saw mention in the Observer report that he's planning on giving honours to some of the people who helped him organise the illegal Downing Street parties. Now, if that's true, it shows he really hasn't learned any lessons at all. That's just going to upset the public even more. He just thinks, as he always has done, that he's immune to the consequences of his actions. He shouldn't be an MP. He should have been a 17th century French king. That is pretty much the only position in history that could have sat comfortably with his ego. But it should be the theme this week, I imagine, because as we gear up for Wednesday itself, so I'll try and pick through his tantrums in the media, which will surely begin tomorrow. Then we'll have Wednesday itself. Everything will kick off. We'll have PMQs as usual. I hope it's a good one, 'cause it's going to have to be to claw its way through this lot. But then there'll be the vote on the Windsor framework that day, which Johnson reckons he can use to show the strength of support he has in Parliament. He's hoping to stoke up a bit of a rebellion for it. Then we have the main event, Johnson's testimony. Be Thursday before I can unpick all of that. Then goodness knows what Friday will bring and the weekend. Annoying because I plan to be out this Saturday, so strap yourselves in. Another Boris Johnson train wreck scheduled to arrive at the station this week. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.